The air in the gym was thick with music sweat and the clang of weights, but none of it drowned out the sound of laughter, sharp mocking, and aimed squarely at Jessica Reed. She stood frozen in the middle of the free weights section, surrounded by three men who thought they owned the place. One of them had just groped her backside, while the others jeered their voices loud enough for every client nearby to hear. Phones came up recording. Someone muttered, "Damn, that's messed up," but no one stepped forward. Jessica's fists clenched at her sides, her jaw tight. Jessica Reed, 30 years old, was no stranger to unwanted attention. But this was different. She'd been a personal trainer for nearly a decade, with a reputation for discipline and professionalism. She could handle the occasional crude comment, but this was public humiliation, engineered by three men who'd been testing her patience for weeks. They were regulars, cocky guys in their mid-20s who strutted around like they owned the gym floor. Brett, the ringleader, had the kind of smirk that made people want to slap it off his face. His friends Mason and Kyle were no better, always flexing in mirrors, cutting into other people's workout time, and making inappropriate comments toward female members. Jessica had warned them before, but they took her professionalism as weakness. That night, they crossed a line. It started with Brett deliberately blocking her path between the squat racks, forcing her to sidestep him. Then, Mason leaned in close, his voice low but dripping with contempt. "Hey, Jess, how about you show us what those muscles are really for?" Kyle chuckled behind her, pulling out his phone as if already anticipating something worth filming. Before she could respond, Brett's hand shot out, grabbing her inappropriately. The reaction from the onlookers was a mix of gasps, awkward laughter, and whispered disbelief. "Come, you liked it," Brett sneered, his tone both taunting and condescending. The humiliation burned hotter than the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Every instinct screamed at her to snap his wrist right there, but she didn't. Not yet. Jessica stepped back, her voice icy. "Touch me again, and you'll regret it." She wanted to walk away, to keep her professionalism intact, but the damage was done. Brett laughed louder, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Oh, relax, trainer. Just having some fun. Don't be so uptight." As she turned to leave, she caught sight of Kyle's phone screen. He was still recording. The idea of that video floating around made her stomach churn, but she knew confronting them here in the middle of the gym would only feed their performance. She headed for the staff room, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the effort it took to hold back. In the mirror, she saw her own reflection, a professional trainer who'd just been treated like a joke in her own workplace. Behind her eyes, though, was something else, something the three of them couldn't see yet. They thought they'd embarrassed her tonight. They thought they'd won. But Jessica knew something they didn't. She had been competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments for the past 8 years. Every muscle in her body wasn't just for show. It was trained for control, precision, and the ability to put an opponent on the floor in seconds. And after what they'd done tonight, she had no intention of letting it slide. The humiliation from that night clung to Jessica like a weight she couldn't shake off. The moment she stepped into the gym. The next day, she felt the stares. Some were pitying, some curious, and others, mostly from the younger male members, were smirks that made her skin crawl. By lunchtime, she understood why. Someone had posted the video online. It wasn't just the groping, they'd edited it with slow-motion zooms and crude captions, turning her into the punchline of their sick joke. Comments flooded in. Trainer got handled bet. She liked it, gym candy for the boys. Her phone buzzed with texts from friends. "Are you okay? And do you want me to report the video?" She appreciated the concern, but the sympathy only deepened the sting. Jessica wasn't a victim by nature. She had built her life on strength, not just physical, but mental. And yet here she was, the subject of a viral clip with every second of it replaying in her mind. She could have taken it to management. She could have demanded the guys be banned. But she knew how that went: a slap on the wrist, at best, maybe a fake apology, and then whispers behind her back that she overreacted. No. If this was going to end, it wasn't going to be through HR emails. Her resolve hardened 2 days later when she saw Brett Mason and Kyle cornering one of her youngest clients, a 16-year-old girl named Lily. Lily was shy, self-conscious about her body, and working with Jessica to build her confidence. The three men loomed over her by the treadmill, blocking her path. Brett leaned against the rail, smirking, while Mason whispered something that made Lily's cheeks flush red with embarrassment. Jessica's voice cut through the noise like a whip. "Step away from her, now." The men turned, Brett's grin widening. "Relax, coach. We're just giving her some tips." Lily's eyes darted toward Jessica, silently pleading. The protective instinct inside Jessica flared like wildfire. She walked over, closing the distance until she was inches from Brett. Her voice dropped low, every word sharp. "You think you're untouchable because you lift heavy and run your mouth louder than anyone else. But here's the thing. Strength isn't measured in pounds or reps. It's measured in how long you last when someone like me decides you've had enough." For the first time, Brett's smirk faltered. She didn't escalate, not here, not in the open. Instead, she placed a steadying hand on Lily's shoulder and guided her toward the locker room. But the decision had already been made in her mind. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every person those three had made uncomfortable every time they'd used intimidation as a game. Jessica began to watch them more closely. She noted their patterns. What days they came in, what equipment they used, how long they stayed. She knew Brett liked to show off on the heavy bag in the far corner of the gym. She knew Mason spent extra time in the functional training room after hours, and Kyle liked to push his PRs when no one was watching. She also knew the gym had a small enclosed training studio with padded mats perfect for private sessions, and perfect for what she had in mind. They wanted to play games. She was going to teach them a new one they wouldn't forget. Jessica's plan took shape like a fight combination, deliberate, timed, and impossible to counter once it started. The gym's weekly schedule was predictable, and the three bullies were creatures of habit. She knew their post-work routines, their preferred equipment, and most importantly, their egos. Friday night was perfect. The place was quieter, the regular after-work rush already thinned out. Jessica had spoken casually to Brett earlier that week, disguising her contempt with a fake easy smile. "Hey," she had said lightly. "I've been working on some advanced grip strength drills. You guys always brag about your power. Want to see if you can beat me at one." It was bait wrapped in flattery. Brett's eyes had lit up. "You outgrip us? No way. We're in." Mason laughed, already picturing himself winning. Kyle, always the echo, just nodded. The trap was set. When Friday came, Jessica had the training studio ready. The door was closed. Lights dimmed, just enough to feel intimate, but not suspicious. The padded mats covered the floor, and a few pieces of functional equipment were scattered about: kettlebells, medicine balls, resistance bands. She'd even set up a small table with water bottles, making it look like an informal competition. They walked in just after 8. Brett Mason and Kyle were in their usual gym uniforms, sleeveless shirts, basketball shorts, and the kind of swagger that said they expected to win before they even started. Brett grinned. "So, coach, what's the challenge, arm wrestling dead hang? Or do we just crush your hand and call it a night?" Jessica smiled back, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, it's a grip test, all right, but it's full body. Think you can handle it?" They exchanged glances, clearly not taking her seriously. "Let's do it," Mason said, rolling his shoulders. She began with something simple: a game she called the squeeze and release. One at a time, they locked hands with her, trying to overpower her grip. It took less than 10 seconds for Jessica to show them just how much pressure she could apply. Brett's confident smirk turned into a wince. Mason's knuckles went white and Kyle actually cursed. "Damn, you're strong," Brett muttered, shaking his hand. Jessica stepped back, her voice calm. That was the warm-up. Now for the real test. She gestured toward the mat. "Ever tried escaping a grip from a grappler? Let's see how you do." They laughed at first, but Jessica's tone had shifted. It wasn't a request, it was a challenge. And their egos wouldn't let them back down. One by one, she had them step onto the mat. First, Brett. He lunged forward, trying to catch her off guard, but Jessica sidestepped, caught his wrist and twisted. In a blink, he was face down. His arm locked at an angle that made him grunt in pain. "Tap," she said evenly. He resisted for 3 seconds before tapping frantically against the mat. She let go. Brett sat up, rubbing his arm, but said nothing. Next was Mason. She caught him in a standing guillotine choke so fast he didn't even have time to trash talk. His hand slapped her back desperately until she released him. Kyle tried to be clever, circling around, but ended up trapped in a wrist lock so tight he yelped like he'd been shocked. When all three were sitting on the mat, sweating and breathing hard, Jessica looked at them steadily. "Still think grip strength's just a game?" None of them answered. They weren't laughing anymore, but she wasn't finished. Jessica paced slowly around them, her sneakers squeaking against the padded mats. Brett, Mason, and Kyle sat hunched over, trying to shake off the ache in their arms and shoulders. The swagger was gone. The only thing left in their eyes was the dawning realization that this wasn't the kind of friendly challenge they thought it was. "Get up," Jessica said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of authority that made people obey without thinking. They hesitated, glancing at one another. "I said get up." They rose slowly, muscles tense. Jessica stepped forward, her expression calm, but her stance predatory. "You've been throwing your weight around here for weeks. Groping, mocking, humiliating people. You think no one will ever push back. Tonight, I'm here to correct that." Brett tried to regain his bravado. "Come on, Jess. We were just messing around." Before he could finish, she exploded into motion. Her hand shot to his wrist, twisting it outward while her other arm snaked under his elbow. She drove him to the mat with a shoulder lock so tight that his knees buckled instantly. Brett cried out, his voice cracking. "Say you're done," she ordered. Okay." "Okay," he shouted. She released him, and he rolled away, clutching his arm. Mason tried to step forward, but she met him head-on, closing the gap and catching his leg with a lightning-fast sweep. He hit the mat flat on his back, the breath punched out of him. Before he could recover, Jessica had mounted him, pinning his wrists to the floor, with her knees pressing into his biceps. She leaned in close, her voice low. "Do you feel small now?" "That's how you've made every woman here feel." He didn't answer. He couldn't, with the air still knocked from his lungs. She let him up, only to turn her gaze on Kyle. Kyle tried to back away, hands raised. "Hey, I didn't even—" Jessica cut him off, grabbing his arm and pulling him into a tight Kimura lock. His face turned red instantly. "Stop. Stop, it hurts," he shouted, tapping frantically against her side. She let go and he staggered backward, breathing hard. The room was silent, except for their heavy panting. Jessica stood in the center, her hands relaxed at her sides, but her eyes locked onto each of them. "You thought you could touch me, record me, humiliate me," she said evenly. "Now you know what my grip can really do. And believe me, this was me holding back." Brett rubbed his shoulder, avoiding her gaze. Mason kept his eyes on the floor. Kyle just shook his head, muttering under his breath. Jessica wasn't interested in apologies. She wanted something better, understanding. Fear. A memory burned deep enough that they'd never dare repeat what they'd done. She walked to the door, unlocking it with a click. Get out, she said. And think very carefully about who you mess with next time. One by one, they filed out shoulders, hunched their usual strut, nowhere to be seen. Jessica stood in the quiet room for a moment, letting her heartbeat slow. Her hands still tingled from the grips, her muscles humming with adrenaline. She knew this wasn't over, not completely. They'd have to live with what happened tonight, and she had a feeling the gym would hear about it soon enough. And when they did, the story wouldn't make her look weak. Jessica didn't have to wait long for the fallout. By Monday morning, the gym was buzzing with whispers. The story had leaked not from her, but from someone who'd been near the training studio that night and had heard enough thuds, yelps, and strained voices to piece it together. Then came the security footage. Someone from management, clearly fed up with Brett Mason and Kyle's behavior, accidentally let the studio's camera feed make its way to the staff group chat. From there, it spread like wildfire, not the full session, but just enough clips to show Jessica effortlessly taking each man down, forcing them to tap, and then walking away without a hair out of place. By lunchtime, those clips had jumped from private group chats to public Instagram stories and TikTok reels. The caption that seemed to stick was simple: grip of steel, respect women. The comments were a mix of awe and applause. She handled them like laundry. Never underestimate a woman who deadlifts. Legend. When Brett and his crew walked into the gym that afternoon, the shift in energy was palpable. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People stepped aside not to make way, but to give them space like they were radioactive. Jessica was at the front desk, chatting casually with a coworker when they approached. She didn't flinch, didn't step back. She simply looked them in the eyes. Brett was the one to speak, his voice low. "We're done. Won't happen again." Jessica gave a slow nod. "Good. Because next time, I won't hold back." They left without another word. Over the next week, Jessica noticed changes. The three men kept to themselves, quieter than she'd ever seen them. More importantly, members, especially women, began approaching her privately to thank her. Some told stories about times the same guys had made them feel uncomfortable. Others admitted they'd been too scared to speak up. It wasn't just about her anymore. The entire gym felt different, safer, more respectful. One evening, as she was racking weights, Lily came up to her, smiling shyly. "Thanks for what you did. Not just for me, for everyone." Jessica smiled back, placing a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder. "Remember, strength isn't just in your muscles. It's in your voice, too. Never let anyone make you feel small." She meant it because she knew firsthand that silence only feeds the bullies. And sometimes the only way to end their game is to play by your own rules and make sure they never forget the outcome. That night, as she locked up and stepped into the cool air, Jessica felt lighter. The sting of that first humiliation was gone, replaced by the satisfaction of having taken control back and the knowledge that she'd just made this gym a place where people could train without fear. And if anyone ever doubted her again, she had more than enough grip to remind them. True strength isn't measured by muscle size or how much weight you can lift. It's measured by the courage to stand up when you're pushed down and the resolve to protect not just yourself, but those who can't yet protect themselves. Bullies thrive on silence and fear, but the moment you confront them with unshakable confidence, their power crumbles. Jessica's grip wasn't just physical, it was the embodiment of self-respect and boundaries. In life, it's not enough to avoid conflict. Sometimes you have to meet it head-on, with skill, dignity, and the certainty that you deserve respect.